Hello, writers, and welcome back to Spooky Writes, your channel all about writing. I'm your host, who is secretly a ghost, Kamal Onor. Now, today we're going to be talking all about the most important triangle. Now, today we're going to be talking about the most important triangle when it comes to writing, and no, it is not a love triangle. So if you get any value from this video, make sure to give it a good thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Help it grow, it means a lot. And with that said, let's head into the storm.
It's the raven's call, the werewolf's howl, the vampire's bite. You search through the woods for safety, but all you find is... Okay, rights.
So today I'm going to be talking about the most important shape in all of writing. It's going to help you structure your story. It's going to help you understand the process that a story or a novel or whatever piece of writing that you're working on, what shape it should take in your writing, in the story, what shape it should take on. And this story structure was created by a playwright, and that playwright's name is Gustav Freytag. So Freytag was a novelist and a playwright, and what he did was when he was alive, he analyzed all of the plays that he could possibly get his hands on, and he saw that they all took a similar structure, and so he ended up creating this Freytag's pyramid. Now we're going to be looking at a little bit piece by piece in this video. So we're going to start off with our inciting incident, and this is going to be the event that starts the story, that starts the novel. It might be the gun goes off, it might be a breakup, it could be whatever it is that you envision being the opening, the scene that's going to start the story. Is it Gandalf shows up and suddenly says, "You must take the ring with me, Bilbo," and that's how the story starts? And it's not necessarily how the story starts, it's more so going to be what's the event that puts the story in motion, that puts the story into action. I will be doing a video where I go into more detail, talking about how to make a more powerful, impactful opening, how to hook the reader, to use the cliche, but how to get the reader's attention, how to spark interest for the reader. And so I will be doing a video about that a little later on. But today we're talking about we're talking about the story structure, and Freytag came up with the pyramid shape because we have our inciting incident, and then we have some exposition, and that's going to be what happens after the gun goes off, what happens after the start of your story, what happens after this event that puts the story into motion. Gandalf shows up, and Bilbo now needs to decide, is he going on an adventure? In Freytag's pyramid, he writes out that you have rising action. Now, this is when the tension in your story, and I'm going to use tension as opposed to action because I feel tension is going to be a stronger word, and whichever word you want to use to visualize it is fine, but I'm going to use tension because tension in your story should rise. Things should get more complicated as your story goes along. It shouldn't just be, oh, here's my character and they're sitting in a bathtub. Stories where characters are simply reminiscing and thinking back on their life, those stories do not do well because there's nothing at stake. You have a character basically sitting in a bathtub saying, "Oh, I remember my childhood. It was like 30 years ago. I remember growing up in the 90s when Hanson was on the radio or Ricky Martin was popular." Just some personal examples. But it's so important to understand that as your story goes along, there needs to be an increase of tension. There needs to be a sense of danger as your story goes along. The tension needs to be heightened, and that he has it rising, and so we have rising action, and that leads us all the way to the pinnacle of the tension in your story, and this is going to be what's called the climax. This is going to be the most tension in your story is going to be at the climax, And this is going to be where maybe your protagonist and your antagonist are finally meeting and they draw lightsabers and they're finally confronting each other. Or it could be this is the moment right before the character has to do whatever is going to be the highest point of tension in your story. And then after that, we have descending action or descending tension, where the story lets up a little, where the tension, we start to relieve some pressure in our story. We write what happens after the hero or the villain has been, when we then start to write about what happens after the climax in the story, what happens after this character has achieved or been unsuccessful in his or her goals and his or her journey, and we start to describe how this has affected that character. And so story-wise, we have inciting event, some exposition talking about what obstacles are in his way, and as the story goes along, there needs to be a heightening of tension. Things need to get worse, things need to get more suspenseful. You need to add, maybe you introduce the antagonist and slowly things get more spooky, they get more scarier, and things start to elevate in your story. And then you get all the way to the climax, and after you hit the climax, which is your peak point of tension in your story, we then have descending action where the danger has sort of passed at this point. The big goal has either been achieved or it's been defeated, or the hero has been unsuccessful and the villain gets away. And so we still have to describe what has happened after the highest point of tension in your story. And that's when we have descending action, and from descending action it leads us towards the resolution and the ultimate conclusion of your story. And so this is going to be a very basic story structure. It's a very basic story arc plot that you can use. I would recommend using it early on as a way to structure your stories. If you feel your story is just kind of meandering through the middle, you should identify that you need to have more attention here. You need to have a climax. You can't just have a story of a character sitting in their bathtub reminiscing about 50 years ago and going, oh, I remember this summer and this one boy that I came across and we had such a fond love for each other. You need to have tension in your story. Your story needs to move throughout the course of your writing. You can't just have a story that's flatlined. And you might have moments in your story where it's going to feel like this might be the climax. You might have moments where you have a lot of tension in your story, but you need to identify where is the climax in your story. Is it the moment right before the character jumps through the window and stabs his brother, or is it the moment at the very end when or is it closer towards the end when he stabs himself, and that's how the play ends, or that's what happens in the story, and that's your highest moment of climax. And so when you're writing your rough draft, think about your story moving in a pyramid kind of a shape, and as you work towards that, you're going to naturally feel your story ebb and flow in this kind of way. And remember, you can only have one climax. You're not going to have multiple climaxes in the story. You're not going to have a moment where everything is super high tension and then you descend and let up a little and then you go right back to super high tension. That's not going to be beneficial to your story structure. Now again, this is simply an analysis that was done by this playwright Freytag, and so it's known as Freytag's pyramid. And you don't necessarily have to stick to it, but this is a great way to get yourself started to get into writing. So remember, it's not a love triangle. That's not the most important shape in your story. You can certainly have a love triangle if you're writing a story that requires it, but you don't necessarily. But the most important shape for every writer to know is Freytag's pyramid. So let me know in the comments down below, have you heard of Freytag's pyramid before? Have you studied or come across it in any of your writings? Have you come across a different story structure that you would like me to cover? I'd be more than happy to cover it in another video, but let me know in the comments down below. And as always, keep it spooky.
And now we must return to the shadows.